We'll reconvene the January 23rd meeting, 2012, of the District 9 Board of Education. The roll has been taken. We've been in closed session since 6:30. We started a couple minutes late. I apologize for that. Let's see, the next item on our agenda is we'll stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. My flag. There's a flag over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. We have 4 subsections: December 12th, open and closed, that's 2, and then December 20th, special meeting and closed session. The chair invites a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Member Beckman moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Member Pavicic moves. We call that vote, please.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries and the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is student perspectives. McDonald, or who we have students?
I believe North High goes first,
Mr. Tasek?
or North High and South High are presenting together.
We are. Good evening. I thought I'd give a little bit of background about tonight's performance, or tonight's information. For years, we have had the J. Kyle Braid organization involved in a presentation of leadership skills for students at our campuses and many of the West Suburban campuses on a day when school was not in session. It rotated to multiple places. And last year, the West Suburban Conference principals decided that we really wanted to have an in-house presentation of our own. We did not want to spend the money to have a poorly attended session on a day off of school, which was inconvenient for students and staff. So this year, the West Suburban Conference sponsored its own leadership workshop. It was held the day before, or the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And the students are going to tell you a little bit about who was there and how it was organized, and Mr. Kasich's going to introduce those students.
And it is my pleasure to introduce the students from South, Alicia Bozak and Daniel Leach. And from North, we have Chloe Pooler and Jim Burke. It's all yours.
Okay. Hi, my name is Chloe Pooler. I'm a senior at Downers Grove North. I was a leader for this experience, which I'll go into detail. I was very lucky to be. It was awesome, and I was happy to be asked. What the event entailed, which is what my part of the speech is how everyone was selected and what happened and things. So it was the West Suburban Conference, or Leadership Conference. I was selected as a leader. We had 3 leaders per school from every school that attended. And 3 adult leaders as well. So each activities director, or our activities director, Dr. Sorensen, and our athletics director, Ms. Kavanaugh, selected 16 students each who had promising leadership skills, and that comprised of the 32 students in attendance. So these are our attendees in our beautiful pictures, because there was a part of the day where we had pictures and it was fun. There were 600 kids in total at this event from 16 schools. All the WSC represented. Excuse me. As a leader, I had a training the week before. It was informative and fun, actually, surprisingly. It was, we demonstrated all the activities, the activities that we would be doing the next week, and I think Alicia will go into detail about that. But the day entailed, started off bright early in the morning. We took pictures of every school by themselves, and then we had a general session 1, and it was great. It was energetic. The speaker talked about presenting yourself and how you come across to others, and then we broke off into small groups, and the small groups were led by 3 or 4 leaders, each from all different schools. So I had the opportunity to meet other good leaders, and then we led a group of students who were all from different schools as well. So it was a big mix, and it was good fun. So we did that in a small group, then back to a large group. And there he talked about examples of leaders and like leadership styles and stuff. Another small group, lunchtime, very nice. And then we went back to the big room to have a general session, but we sat with our school this time, and then had a small group with our school. Jim's job to tell you about, and then we had a closing, and had a good talk on the bus ride home about what a fun day it was. So I think that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Chloe. My name is Danny Leach, and I'm a senior at Downers Grove South, and my job tonight is to talk about kind of what we took away from the whole experience. And obviously there's a lot of things said about leadership, but some of the things that affected me personally was about decision making. The thing that I learned was that leaders are doers, and doers are action oriented. Obviously they're always wanting to take charge and to be the leader, except the thing about action oriented is that action requires decisions. And that's what the guy, or the speaker there, stressed a lot at the night. Was you need to make very good decisions as a leader, and one of those is it may not be the unpopular, it may not be the popular decision, so sometimes you got to go down the path that is not unpopular, and it's not popular, sorry. And another big thing is that, choosing not to get involved is not an option. The thing that's kind of silly, but that stuck with me, is the 3 Ps. It's called the pooper, the pointer, and the performer. And the pooper is the person that creates the problem, the pointer is the person that points the problem out, and the performer is the person that scoops up the problem and does something with it. And that's who we are. We're the leaders, and we're the people that scoop it up and do something about it. Leaders do not point out the problem and have other people do it. So that's something that stuck with me. One activity that we did there that entitled communication was called Let Your Legos Do Your Talking. And what this involved was 3 rows of about 6 chairs in each row, and the students aligned themselves in the chairs. And the person in the back of the chair, or the person in the last chair, had a bag of Legos, and the person in the front of the row had that same bag of Legos. And the object of the little activity was for the person back to create like a figure out of the Legos, and then without kind of turning around and screaming at the person in front, the person in front had to duplicate that exact same figure that the person in back created. And the rules were that you had to stay facing forward, and that you couldn't, like I said, turn around and scream to the person in front and say, hey, I am building this, put the red piece there. So it was a lot about communication and saying clear directions and checking for understanding. So that was huge. And that's probably the other big thing that I came out with tonight was communication. And that the big thing was that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should be 2 times as much listening than you should be speaking. Sorry, I'm kind of speaking a little randomly here, but that was big for me, because that kind of the moral of that activity was that listening is more important than it is to speak and going crazy with your mouth. And it kind of sums up with a quote, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So that's my job, and here is Tim to talk about the action plan, or Jim, sorry.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, my name is Jim Burke, and I'm a junior at Downers Grove North High School. I was lucky enough to be selected to attend the West Suburban Leadership Conference, and closer to the end of the conference, all of the leaders were who were present there. We were told to go meet with the rest of our school for a small group talk that Chloe had talked about earlier. One of the main ideas that we focused on during this small group session was to talk about like different ideas on how we can improve North and different aspects at North. We all felt that it was a very important topic that definitely had room for improvement, school spirit, and that if some of the leaders at our school started talking about these events more often and tried to get more people to come out, others would join in, and we would be able to show other schools all what North's about and showing our school spirit and our school's pride. At North, we have a club called the End Zone, and this consists of a group of spirited students who we try to attend as many sporting events, school events, anything that goes on. We try to attend as many of those as we can, to show others at our school, to get involved in our school and really like show what our school is about, and again, show that pride in our school. It was during the small group session, it was hard at first because we didn't really understand that much about the End Zone. I mean, we had heard about it, but we hadn't really communicated well with them. And so in that meeting, we tried and discuss about good ideas that we could use to talk, with the students and give them, because a lot of us didn't really know. We knew when the big basketball games were and such, but we didn't really know, all the sporting events. We want to, support every group at our school. So we came out with the idea of having a Twitter account And by using the Twitter account, we were able to send out messages to whoever signed up for it. We sent emails to all the students at North saying, hey, you can follow this on your phone, because almost every teenager nowadays has a phone. So, we could easily receive a text message saying, hey, there's a basketball game tonight, or hey, the bowling team's playing tonight, like, let's go support them, anything that we could do, we felt that was a really good idea, that we could use that. So, yeah, and then also with that, with the improvements in the end zone, there's been a lot of different school spirit throughout the year. Last Friday, we had an assembly talking about Positively North and trying to pep up school spirit. And also, we promoted an idea of school spirit on Fridays. Dr. Sorensen, the student activities coordinator, he would pick 2 random ID numbers, and he would call you down to his office. And if you were wearing purple that day, you would receive a prize. So that definitely, boosted school spirit, because now we're showing our color and showing our pride at our school. And then this coming February, the West Suburban Conference leaders from North plan to meet again, to try and think of any other new ideas, or ways to improve. There's always room for improving school spirit at our school, and any other thing that goes on. So we're definitely looking to meet then and talk about what's going to go on. So thank you.
All right. I'm Alicia Bozek. I go to South. And I am going to talk about our action plan that we came up with, which ironically, we haven't compared action plans yet, but ours is also to improve more school pride than school spirit, because when we were sitting down, all 32 of us in our small group, we decided that our super fans, which is a club we started this year, is doing a good job of going to big events, getting things rallied for sports and things like that. But we all agreed that South has a very wide spectrum of talented kids in not only sports, but speech and choir and all our fine arts. Even our artists are all great, and not a lot of people know about that, because if you're not involved in things like that, you would really never know how good our speech team is, how good our theater is, things like that. So what we decided we wanted to do was increase things like that along with sports, because like Jim said, we have huge turnouts for football and basketball, but it's a little frustrating for kids who play like softball when you're constantly supporting, other people, and sometimes your classmates don't show you the support back. So what we were trying to do is widen our scheme of fans in things other than football and basketball. So our next step was figuring out how we were going to do this, because we've obviously been trying to do it for a really long time and it's hard. So we came up with 2 ideas. Our first one was what we unofficially named the punch card system, which logistically we haven't figured out yet, but it's something we want to put into action next year. And so everyone who's involved in anything, be it a sport or choir or speech or anything like that, hopefully in advance to when their season starts, would get a card with 5 or 8 or 10 punches on it, and they have to attend that many events before they can start doing their season or whatever. So for example, for me, I play softball. Hopefully what would happen is in the beginning of next year, so September of 2012, all the girls that want to go out for softball will get their punch card, and every time you go to a play or a football game or a bowling match or anything like that, you get a punch on your card, which is our way of increasing involvement as well as school pride. Our second idea was this Big Brother, Big Sister program that we came up with for teams and clubs and things like that to support each other. So for instance, the tennis team and the bowling team will be matched together, and they will have to attend one event of the other team or club or whatever it is. The speech team could be paired with the jazz band, things like that. So we incorporate big groups attending each other's things. So that was one of our other ideas. And the last step was figuring out when we were going to work out the logistics of this, which Mr. Constance and Mr. Aldworth got together and decided our late start Wednesdays would be perfect for everyone who's involved in all these things to meet. So we actually have our first meeting on Wednesday, this Wednesday, and we're not sure how often. Hopefully it'll be at least every other, but that way all 32 of us can come together and share our ideas and hopefully get all of these things into the system by next year. So that is our plan for South. And that is all we have for you, so thanks for listening.
Any questions? Everybody, come back to the microphone. Any board members have questions?
I just want to say I think that's a great idea at South. My children all graduated from South, and that was one of the things that I thought was a little lacking, was all of this team spirit. So I think that's really a great idea.
Thank you.
Good going.
Anybody else?
Have you gotten a really positive response as you've presented this to other students?
We have
Both
our
schools,
super
you
fan.
first and then North?
Yeah, you can go. We have our super fan club.
All right.
And I am the president or whatever I am, I'm the treasurer or something. But we talked to them and they love the idea, especially our big brother, big sister thing. Because sometimes it's hard to get, 30 plus kids at like a bowling match, which we found is very hard. But if we have like the whole tennis team has to go to their pack the place for the bowling match, and then it reciprocates, that seems to help because a lot of times we have people saying like, well, I'll go to the volleyball game, but the volleyball team's not going to come to our pack the place, which we found is a problem that is hard to work around. So that was our solution for that. And yes, the people we have talked to about this, and all 32 of us have thought that that is going to be something
Great.
that's, yeah. So.
North High,
What?
with your end zone?
Yes, so we do have the end zone, and the end zone has a couple like key leaders, and taking away from what we learned at the leadership conference, we all decided that the 32 of us that attended really need to step up our participation in that, and our outreach to other groups and to all our friends and things, and same kind of idea, the wrestling clique, let's go out to see the band thing. So as leaders, we each told each other and have been speaking to each other and spreading the word about different events via Twitter and Facebook and posts and messages such as that, and it has definitely made a difference. We have Northside Pride and stuff that now that has somehow come about, and we hashtag Go Trojans every Friday night. It's trending with us anyway, so it's cool.
Thank you very much. That's very encouraging.
Okay, now the next item on our agenda is reception of visitors. We normally have 2 opportunities for the public to speak and address the board. Usually at the first reception of visitors, we have people speak to us about action items, things that we're going to make decisions on this evening. Okay. This evening, there's going to be a slight exception from that. We have an agenda item to receive an informational presentation about the North High Improvement Plan. And if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to address us about that, you can speak about that this evening as part of the first reception of visitors. Please understand there is no decision that's going to be made this evening. This is an informational meeting on that subject. The procedures we follow is that people that wish to speak to us have 3 minutes, and it's our practice that the board not engage. It's not an opportunity for back and forth dialogue or discussion, but rather it's an opportunity for you to make a statement. And there will be other opportunities after the meeting or elsewise to talk to members of the administration or to members of the board. And we do have, in the very next segment of the meeting, a presentation from the administration regarding the North High Master Site Plan. So with that, if there's anybody that wishes to address the board for 3 minutes, please come to this microphone over here, state your name and address, and explain what you have to say. Okay, we're list? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, Chris Patterson is on?
Yes, my name is Chris Patterson. My wife and I have lived at 4502 Prince, which is directly across the street from the courtyard, for the past 27 years. We've come to voice our support of the plan as last presented by North High School. We do believe it is in the best interest of the safety of the students and the best opportunity to move to relieve the traffic congestion on Prince and Grant by moving the student pickup after school activities to an organized parking lot rather than the chaos that we currently have on Prince Street and Grant Street. I know there's an alternate proposal that's you've heard, or if not, you will hear soon, lining the buses up between the football field and the new athletic field. In our view, that presents a barrier between the athletic field and the school facility to all the students who would be using those facilities. It also, I believe, would encourage the status quo in terms of the after-school pickup. Students aren't meeting their parents in the north parking lot now, And they're not going to if that all is pushed to the north end of the lot. So it's going to result in the congestion that we currently have there. As you can imagine, this is going to be a big change in scenery for those properties bordering Grant Street and Saratoga. So I would encourage you to follow through on the best landscaping plans that you can offer, as well as maintenance of the property, and restricted parking if that's practical for periods of time when the lot and the facilities aren't being used by sanctioned North High School or junior high activities. I didn't organize a group of neighbors in support of this. The only neighbor that I did talk with shares our view and supports the plan. I know that there are approximately a dozen houses on Prince Street that I believe would benefit from the parking in the parking lot and elimination of the student pickup on Prince Street. So unless there's others here to voice that opinion, I suspect I might be representing the silent majority tonight. Thank you.
Okay, we have Tom Egan on the list.
Good evening. My name is Tom Egan. I live at 4501 Saratoga Avenue. My house is on the corner of Grant and Saratoga. I'm one of the houses that Mr. Patterson said would be looking out onto the parking lot as opposed to a soccer field. I'd like to start off by saying that I believe we never would have been here tonight if the district administration under Superintendent McDonald had reached out to the neighbors and those living within several blocks of Downers Grove North at the outset of planning for the site improvement plan. Instead, we were presented with a plan that had already been developed and paid for with no neighborhood input, which has raised a number of concerns regarding student safety, traffic flow, and the integrity of the Prince subdivision. This modus operandi of the district is perceived by many. I think this quote from a former commissioner on the Downers Grove Planning Board sums it up. Quote, "My lasting impression of how the district operates is that a strong-willed superintendent and his administrative staff maintain control of the funding and planning process, often by enlisting the willing support of a majority of school members who don't actually do the heavy lifting. When it comes time to gain community approval, they spoon-feed the taxpayers, avoid controversy with citizens most affected, and when they need help gaining approval, they enlist parents with school-age children sympathetic to their cause. I don't know whether the school board or the citizens group developed the alternative plans, but it would seem that one or more would be a good alternative to what has been proposed. As I understand it, this is a case where the administration has said that they have reviewed the feasible alternatives and still like the original plan better, regardless of its impact on the neighboring residents," unquote. You were presented with the plan for north site improvement in January 2011. We were presented with the plan in October 2011. And now, just a few hours ago, I learned that the student parking lot will be closed March 1st, and students will be allowed to park on one side of Saratoga and one side of Highland during school hours, where there currently is an ordinance prohibiting that kind of violation, that kind of parking. I don't know if this has already been approved by the village or not, or if it's intended that the village will approve this recommendation. If that's the case, I can't get over the hubris of the board in assuming that you can do basically whatever you choose to do. So the bulldozing of the plan continues. There's been, some of you were elected to the board last year on a platform that spoke of open communication. Last week, the district issued a statement about having met its legal obligation in posting notices, etc. This is true, but the district only did the minimum required by law. The district's obligation to the taxpayer should be to meet best practice standards. In other words, to do the maximum. In this, in my opinion, the district has failed. You heard this quote, which characterizes the board historically as a rubber stamp for the district's administration's recommendations. I ask you to take a more active role in this manner, as the administration is accountable to you, not the other way around. Please listen with an open ear to what my friends and neighbors have to say about the issues and concerns we have. There is no need to scratch the itch associated with $14 million waiting to be spent on a plan that has serious shortcomings. Ask the administration the tough questions. Make your own evaluations concerning the efficacy of the site plan. Consider whether or not this process needs to slow down until the issues are thoroughly listened to and reviewed. I want to be proud of the school where my 2 children received such an excellent education. I do not wish to remember the district as a bulldozer that doesn't care what is in its path and who's run over in the process. Thank you.
We have Bill Cussman.
Hi, my name is Bill Cussman, and I live at 4504 Saratoga. Both of my kids go to North. I've lived there about 15 years now. I work out of my house, and I think I'm a good surveyor of what goes on in that area. Just to tell you right off the bat, a lot of us neighbors, we kind of like the living by the school and the excitement and everything that goes along with it. And I am definitely for a unified campus at North. I mean, it would be something that would just enhance the whole area if we did it right. And what I want to tell you is what I see, okay? So, again, I work out of my house. I see what happens. When the kids leave school, all of the buses are lined up in a row, okay? And then there's people out there getting the kids on. The buses leave, they leave into they go down Prince and they can cut down Grant Street, they can go out the other way. I mean, it is really like clockwork. Then all the kids in the parking lot get in their cars and they leave. By 3:15, I mean, really the neighborhood is literally dead. I mean, everyone's gone. What we see as a potential problem, and we don't think that this was really thought out that well, we're talking about the after-school activities between 4:30 and 6:30. Now, I know that neighbor had left, and he was talking about all that mayhem, on Prince Street. And it is. I went there at 5:30 today. There's cars lined up all the way, almost to Lincoln, all the way to the football field on one side, including cars and buses, and then on the other side, okay? So what you're gonna do is, you wanna close all that traffic, there's hundreds of parents picking up kids on that west side, because that's where all the activities are. Every sport is on the west side of the building. They're not gonna cut through, all the way through, go past Main Street and get picked up there, because it's easier for them to pick up there, okay? So here's where the problem is. You're gonna try to funnel out some of these cars and buses into that parking lot. Now that parking lot exit is 50 feet from the stop sign on Saratoga and Grant. A bus is 40 feet long, and then you put one more car. Now that exit is blocked. And what you guys really need to see, I mean, really, Bill, you live right there. Come down there at 5:30. We get all the rush hour traffic. We get everyone who wants to cut through Saratoga to get to Warren, and then they want to cut by Forest by the library and cross the tracks that way so they don't have to go to Main Street. And we even had a survey done. There are, on an average day, which most of it's during the week of these business cars, 3,100 cars go down Saratoga. And you want to put this parking lot entrance so that there's no room to get to that stop sign. I mean, they could go right, but most of Downers Grove is south of there, okay? We see it as a big potential problem. And not only that, you have besides the rush hour, you have the dual traffic, and all these people who are trying to cut a couple minutes off their time, they don't even let you out of their driveway. There's no way they're gonna let parents and buses get out of that lot. I see a potential huge traffic jam at Saratoga and Grant. And what happens here at South, I mean, maybe you're trying to mimic some of the South. You guys are on North Fork. North Fork is literally closed off to any traffic besides South activities. You have both of those streets blocked off. It dead ends into Powers. You're talking about Saratoga. You want to put a main entrance 50 feet from the stop sign on Grant and Saratoga. I really think that no one really thought this through. I think the traffic studies that were done were off the peak hours. And I invite you, I mean, Billy, you live right there, you know, by Lee. Come sit there, park there on you know, Saratoga and Grant. Look at all the cars on Prince. Where are you going to put all those? On Saratoga, where you got all the rush hour traffic? I think it's going to be absolutely crazy. And one last thing I will tell you is that now people can park. You're going to get a lot more parents parking on Saratoga because they're going to tell the kid, you know, just I'll meet you over on Saratoga. If you even go by Saratoga during a football game and you have parking all the way down there, you have barely enough room to get by with 2 cars. Now you're going to have buses and cars coming from the other way. I'm telling you, I sat and I watched this again tonight. I see really a potential nightmare. And the one last thing I'm going to say is you have all, if I'm taking, for example, if North had a swim meet with 4 different schools and you had all those buses in that parking lot that is right by there, then you'd have parents in there too. You know, no one's really, there's no, they have people monitoring the buses when the kids get out. But at this after activity time, there's nobody monitoring that. So you're gonna have buses and parents in that parking lot, and if no one doesn't see a safety problem with that, I really don't think that someone thought this through. What we're trying to tell you is that if you put the parking lot on the other side, we still think you're gonna have a little bit of problem because you know, you only have the one exit, but you're gonna need another exit coming out Prince too. It has to be rethought because I think what you have is just not gonna work.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll have
Okay.
that person. Okay, we have Mary Cussman.
Hello. Thank you for your time. I'd like to speak about the same issue that my neighbors have brought up. I want to talk for a moment about the meeting that we had, the first meeting that we had just a few weeks ago with members of the district administration, Mr. McDonald. I believe Mr. Davenport was there, Ms. Browning was there, and Mr. Hiscock was there, and several of the planners that were involved in this plan. I was a little concerned because, well, first let me say, we really are in favor of the plan. Not the plan as it's proposed, but the idea of expanding your campus and of unifying the campus we think is a great idea. We all moved near the high school with our eyes open. We knew we were buying homes near a school. And as my husband said, we enjoy the energy of the students. We don't even mind that at 9 o'clock at night sometimes there's buses that are roaring through our neighborhood. It's all good stuff. We love hearing homecoming games, we love the football games, and we love the positive activity around our homes. Our message is simple, flip it. Flip the proposed plan where you would have the soccer field close to our house and the parking lot further away from our property. It doesn't seem to make sense to destroy the integrity of the neighborhood while you can still move that parking lot and achieve the same goals. Several other plans were proposed and rejected outright. We were never given at that meeting a real concrete reason why our plan was rejected. There may be a very good reason, but we as community members and taxpayers don't know. When we finally asked Mr. McDonald point blank, are you going to implement any of the, or one of the neighbors had said, who makes the final decision? Who is the CEO of this plan? Who makes the final decision? Like, who can we appeal to? And Mr. McDonald said, me. And we said, are you going to implement, and Mr. Davenport, you were there. So correct me if I'm wrong. We also said, are you going to listen and implement any of the changes that we've proposed? And he said, "Are you going to change the plan?" And he said, "No." So I kind of felt like at that point, why were we even there? I felt like no one was listening to us. No one was really taking into consideration our ideas. It wasn't even given lip service to say, well, we're going to meet about this and we'll get back to you. It was decided right there and then that nothing was going to change. And many of us did not even receive notice that there was going to be a meeting. We didn't know. Some of my neighbors knew about an October date. I didn't know about that. Neither did many other of the neighbors that I had spoken to along Saratoga. So that was troubling to me. It felt like by the time we got involved, deal was done, no changes were going to be made. I would hope that you would not be a board that would not stop, take a minute, and make sure that this is positive for all people involved. We would like a plan that fits all of our needs, and we believe that that can be achieved. We don't really see that there's a reason to go beyond keeping the properties as they are. Put the parking lot further away that would address many of the concerns, and put the green space closer to our homes that would maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. I know that Ms. Browning made a comment in the paper that we are a few, but the impact to us is great. And so although we are few, our voices are important. And all you have to do is look back in history, even just a couple of years, and a few people were saying, slow down, these decisions are bad. But because they were a few, they were ignored. You can look at Americans with disabilities, you can look at the economic downfall of our country in terms of mortgages. A lot of people were ringing the bell saying, slow down, don't do this. And the majority just plowed through, and bad things happened for all of us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then Cindy Schramm.
Hi, I'm Cindy Schramm, and I live at 4442 Saratoga, and I basically live right on the corner of Saratoga and Grant. I see it all. I am totally for this program. I shouldn't say totally, but I am for this program. I worked in the district for 18 years. I was pro-student the whole time I was there. I am now sitting and watching what's going on safety-wise, okay? I'm one of those that's at home at 3 o'clock when the parents start lining up to pick up their kids. Now, it's been perceived that we're all upset over the fact that we have all of this influx of parking right now to pick up their kids because they have no place to pick them up. We moved into the neighborhood 27 years ago. All of my kids were still at Pierce Downer. They've gone through all of the schools. I can proudly say that you guys have done the right thing by my kids. All were well educated. They all got productive lives because of it. However, what I'm worried about at this stage of the game is I'm seeing little Johnny, who's only 6 years old, walking home from Pierce Downer, and he has to cross Saratoga and Grant. And I'm seeing others from Herrick that are coming home. And I'm seeing our high school kids that are coming away from the school, and they're all crossing the school at the same time. You're going to put traffic over there for the parents to pick up their kids, because now that the street is going to be opened, the parents are either going to circle the street or they're going to try to get into the parking lot with the buses, okay? Right now, I really truly don't have a count, but I can tell you that your traffic report is flawed, you know, on this one, because the woman sat in my yard and did the counting. I basically watched it, and it's nowhere near what it is, the traffic flow is right now. Now that the weather's bad, the parents are trying to pick up their kids, the buses are trying to pull out. You're gonna pull a lot of buses back onto Saratoga. The street isn't wide enough right there to get those buses safely on and off of the street. And then you're going to park them. Now, working in the district for as long as I did, North and South are two different animals. North is not landlocked. South is not landlocked. You have land here, okay? And I'm not sure exactly what lot you've got the buses in and how far you're allowed to separate them. But if you're going to physically put 20 buses in there And the way that you want to put those buses, the safety of those students in those buses is not safe either. And the transportation, you know, what is it called? National Student Transportation Association discourages what you're doing. They're saying it's not safe. So all I'm saying at this stage of the game is we came to you, we were asked to come, we came to you in the November meeting. We basically were told, yes, you know, we'll work with you. The next day, some of our options were put out on the table. It was never discussed. It was never a large group. There's a lot of us that would gladly sit down with you guys, and as long as you're being honest with us over these situations. But right now, there is no communication, which puts a big question mark in our minds over honesty. It wasn't like that when I was at North. I don't want us to have that reputation. My last comment to Mr. McDonald the night that we got together is, please don't put a black eye on District 99 over a situation like this because you're unwilling to work with us. And that's all we're asking at this stage of the game is we need answers and we would like some communication. I'm sorry, but that's a big fault right now with everybody. I mean, perfect example is tonight, you know? We're all sitting over at the district building. None of us were ever notified. It's still on the website that it's at the district. So how many of us are not here because we have no idea where we're supposed to be tonight? Those are the problems. And it's not going to hurt anybody at that stage of the game. And all we're asking, flip it. Sit down and discuss with us. If you're really, truly not going to flip it, sit down and give us an honest answer instead of because we said so. Or because we don't, Johnny's mother and dad are going to get mad because he's going to get wet getting to a bus.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Is there anybody else who's not on the list that wants to speak? Okay, come forward to the microphone. I've been letting people go more than the 3 minutes, but since there's a lot of people, we have to try to keep the time.
Hi there. I'm Tom Smith. I'm at 1205 Grant Street, right at the corner of Prince and Grant. I'd like to talk about a few things, a few reasons. Some of them have been addressed, but I just want to reinforce them, and these are reasons why we think it would be a better idea to flip the lot. There are bus safety issues that I want to focus on. The proposed parking lot is supposedly going to eliminate bus stacking. That was one of the major points that was made in the justification for vacating Prince Street. I share the opinion of everybody else in the neighborhood. I think the vacation of Prince Street is a good idea. I think that the unification of the school is a good idea. And I enjoy living in the neighborhood as well because I feel more part of the community because I am that close to the school. I chose to live there too. But what the stacking taking place in the neighborhood, this is a safety concern because there are students, pedestrian traffic going up and down Prince Street in the morning and in the afternoon. The stacking in the morning is not going to be changed at all because the bus parking and unloading process is not going to change at all. That was stated in a couple meetings, and unless that was just, I don't know why that would be said if it wasn't the case. I did go and observe what happens in the morning with the bus stacking, and there are buses, they can only unload 2 at a time because of where the loading zone is, and so if they start arriving too quickly, then they go back and back and back down Prince Street. You can fit about 5 buses along Prince Street, and then they're heading to be south of Lincoln. The buses then pull forward and park in the designated parking area so that if students have left something, the drivers check to see if anything was left. I did see buses pulling around and then backing into a stall in front of another bus, and that is clearly a safety hazard too. The fact that the buses are dropping and then going north of Prince, that means they're still crossing that crosswalk where all of the pedestrian traffic is. And so that's, again, not being addressed. After school, there is an expectation that stacking won't happen either. But the reason that stacking will happen after school still is because the buses have to be in a sufficient enough order still to be able to get into the lot, into their designated stalls. As such, there's still going to be stacking, because if you have a few buses show up that are at the back of this stacked arrangement, two bus arrangement, they're going to have to wait until the bus that's supposed to be in front of them can get into place. Okay. The buses typically are required to leave at about 3:45. They do often, but faculty are also going to be using this lot. That means that there will be car traffic in the lot as well, and everybody's being directed toward the same exit. So I don't really think that this fits the stated letter that says, and I quote from Marty Schock on October 26th, providing better pedestrian and school bus access to the campus in a safer and more effective manner. I don't see how this is achieving that. The proposal actually requires that students have to walk between buses to get into the bus. In the proposal that you saw in January 24th of 2011, that was one of the things that was highlighted, that students are walking between buses. Well, the reason they were walking between buses is because that's where the student parking lot is right now. The student parking lot has been moved, so that risk has already been mitigated. And now students are walking between buses because they're being directed to do so. It blocks the door to the buses behind, and you will need many more safety people on staff monitoring those doors.
Well, thank you. The next person?
Good evening. My name is Roger Baumann, and I live at 4500 Prince Street. I have 2 children that will be in Downers Grove North High School. I just want to confirm that we do support an improvement plan, the plan of the area. I think it's a good thing we're making changes and you have a unified campus. I think my family's real issue is the fact we're bringing that existing parking lot much closer to Grant, and that really is our biggest issue. Right now, I think the plan is correct, the fact that it's going to remove some traffic from our neighborhood directly after school, because the student parking lot is going to be on the east side of the campus. I have no doubt in that. That really isn't where our issue is. Right after school is very efficient, run very well. I have to commend you for that, for the amount of students you move in and out of the area and the traffic. It's done very well. Our real area where we see it, I mean, we're at Prince and Grant. I'm at ground zero. So I don't need a traffic study to tell you what it looks like. I know when it's bad, and I know how bad it gets. We live it. It's right outside our front window. We knew it was there when we moved in. You know, we accepted it, but it gets a little out of control sometimes. We believe bringing that parking lot closer is going to support the existing after-school activities. It's going to be big enough to bring everybody over. The students aren't going to park on the east side of the campus for the after-school activities. There's going to be ample room on the west side. That's where the parking is going to take place. And that intersection at Prince and Grant is where all the problems are going to put. You're going to put that entrance right outside our front door, right on that intersection. And that's really where our biggest concern is. We really strongly encourage you to really consider the time frame we're talking about with the after-school activities and bringing that parking lot south, and can really reconsider pushing that farther away from that intersection. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yep.
Jenny Baumann, 4500 Prince, and I'm here to support the neighborhood's proposal to flip the plan. We understand you're going to do improvements. We support them. We get it. We're a part of it. But we're just asking to reconsider an alternative. It's very simple to put the parking lot on the north end. And I have to read this because I'm going to forget things. It's my understanding that the master site plan has been in the makings for many years, and hundreds of thousands of dollars have already been spent in the preliminary phases, all on the premise of improved student safety. The plan does take all of the school buses and park them in a parking lot and out of the neighborhood. However, with all of the people in the neighborhood that I have talked to, gone door to door to see, or met with on a one-to-one basis, and had meetings with, not a single one has complaints about all the buses in the neighborhood. The school has a very successful, efficient, well-oiled machine that in 20 minutes or less gets all of those kids out on the buses and the buses out of the neighborhood. But what I can't in any way understand or wrap my head around is that somehow the absolute busiest time of the day, after school extracurricular activities between 5 and 8, and the single most dangerous time for students has been completely overlooked and was not at all addressed in the master plan. In fact, of the school's own admission, and I quote, "They didn't even realize this time was a problem." I don't get it. How many dollars and how many hours have been spent on this safety project, and nobody knows about the busiest and most dangerous time of the day? When the traffic study was done, this time was not even considered, counted, or accounted for in the prediction of what the intersection would look like after Prince Street was vacated, nor was the additional traffic from the increased use of the new facilities accounted for. As it stands, from the hours of 5 to 8, there is nonstop traffic. People parked in no parking zones, people double parked in no parking zones, people parked in the middle of the intersection, cars parked over the crosswalks, and children scattered in every direction, dodging cars, jumping into oncoming traffic between cars, and running into the intersection to meet their parent, parked in the intersection. Just tonight, a semi parked in the intersection, while cars and students peeked around it to safely enter the intersection. It was a slow night, and I counted 249 cars and twice as many students in the intersection for 1 hour. That's 500 students and 250 cars in 1 hour, and now you're going to take away one entrance. All of this is happening at that intersection with not a single adult, staff member, coach, safety officer, not a single person to help with a situation that can only be described as nothing less than complete chaos. It's only a matter of time before there is a pedestrian car collision, and this doesn't even address that, God forbid, me or my neighbors or an injured child should ever need an emergency vehicle to get down Prince Street. And what you haven't explained to the public is that when the master site plan is completed, there will be an additional 2 hours of this chaos after school when this congested intersection is opened up as a free-for-all for pickup and drop-off of students. You've taken the buses, but given us an additional 616 cars that drop off and pick up their kids. How did the board not include any plan for the efficient and safe pickup and drop-off of 28% or 616 of their students? And those are your numbers. I'm asking you please to reconsider and flip the parking lot up to the north end of the lot and teach the parents that it is the appropriate place for drop-off and pick-up from extracurricular activities. This will separate the car traffic and the pedestrian traffic, thus decreasing the opportunity for a catastrophic collision of child and vehicle. With Prince vacated and the drop-off in a north lot, those students will no longer have to battle that intersection. They can safely get to their cars, activities, and their rides home with through the vacated Prince. Additionally, walkers would not have to contend with all of the eager, frustrated, distracted parents who every day disobey a myriad of traffic laws at the intersection of Grant and Prince. If the entrance to that parking lot is moved to Prince and Sherman, these parents have a much better route for exiting the area. The school board does a lot of things right, as the school district is one of the best in the state, but this plan is flawed. Please don't be closed to the idea that there just might be another way. We are not in any way objecting to improvements, but we do want you to change the environment of excluding the neighborhood in your plans. I know that it's going to be really difficult for one or several of you to have the courage to step up and be our voice, but in my heart, I know that there are issues that need to be addressed by this board in regard to the master site plan. You must understand how very dangerous that corner is, and how it will be even more dangerous when the plan is set forth. I can only imagine that if you step back and put yourself in our shoes, you would fight for the same. Please flip the soccer field and parking lot, and you can still achieve your goals. You all ran for this board with much different intentions than the ones that have surfaced through the progression of this project. Practice those changes, communicate with us, and consider us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Kevin O'Connor. I live at 4600 Prince Street, about a block down from the intersection in question. And you've heard a lot of good points here this evening. I'm an architect with a major firm in Chicago. We engage in master planning processes, cities all around the world. And I know that there's no one plan that's completely flawless. And 2 plans have been proposed here, parking lot on the south, soccer field on the north, and vice versa. And I think what you're hearing here is that the neighbors around the school are just asking for an opportunity to hear the discussion about why the proposed, their proposal of putting the parking at the north end is not a good idea. None of us really understand it. I, for one, living a block away from the high school, am kind of surprised that I didn't get much notification of this. I've heard most of what I know about this issue from neighbors, not from the district, and I live a block away from the high school. I think it's a valid, viable option that the neighbors are asking for consideration of. I think we just want open dialogue. We want to, you know, there's going to be pros and cons to any one of those master plans, and all we're hearing is that this is the plan that's been decided on, and that doesn't feel like to us that we're being listened to at all. And then one last question is an architect and trying to consider the area impacted around the projects that I work on. I would ask, you know, as you walk out your front door in the morning or in the evening, what would you rather see across the street from your house? A parking lot or a soccer field? You can put lots of landscaping out there, probably be a few street trees, but just the general way that area is zoned, the closer you get to Ogden is more a business-like environment. Parking kind of fits there. As you get farther south towards the area where we all live, it's more residential in character, and I would say, in my mind anyway, the soccer field is more of that, is a better place in our neighborhood than a parking lot. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, please come forward.
Thank you. My name is Jody Walsh. I live at 4536 Saratoga. I'm at the corner of Saratoga and Lincoln. I wasn't going to speak tonight. I'm here to support my fellow neighbors, but what I would like to encourage you is to think about community safety, not just your student safety. I have 3 very small children of my own, and I live on a busy street. Within my next door neighbors and 2 neighbors across from us, between us, we have 7 children under the age of 5. So I think any of you might know how instantaneously those children can just instinctively go and run. If I turn my back for a split second, I can't tell you how devastated I would be. And I would hope that you would be devastated if something happened, not only to your students, but to your community. So my message mirrors your message, safety first. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name is John O'Malley, and I live at 4513 Saratoga. I'm retired. My wife and I have lived in the same house for 40 years. And I'm, as the traffic safety study goes, I'm the expert. because we've lived there for a while. I just want to support everybody here. I'm behind them 100%. I think they're on track, and I really hope that you'll consider what we have to say tonight. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Hello, everyone. My name is Bruce Rhodes. I live at 4509 Saratoga, right next door to John, and yeah, he does know the neighborhood quite well. I can vouch for that. I'm very proud of our school. I've had two sons that have been fortunate enough to go to Downers Grove North and have had a great education. So I speak very highly of our school and many of the improvements that I've seen go on there over the 16 years now that I've been in the neighborhood. I had a thought on this whole project. I don't know all the ins and outs on how this goes and what the school board is and the district is supposed to do and who they're supposed to notify and who is supposed to get together and talk these things through. All I know is it seems that we've been informed of the whole project very late in the decision making. As a real estate investor and a renovator, I know every project that I do has a plan to it, and I have to consider everybody, not only just the building, but my neighbors and the community, and I take it all into consideration before we spend money and make the project happen. On this particular project, a couple of things that just seem to keep coming out in the conversations, and one of them is with the traffic flow and the study that was done and the flaws in the study. So I would ask that the board and whoever would be in charge of this to take another look at it, to study the traffic flow. I considered putting video cameras up and just recording a couple of days in a row and then go back and review the film and count all the cars so it's a totally honest count of the intersections. I would be even willing to be a volunteer for the board or for the district to set that up at no cost to the district if it would be of some help. Another thought I had was this closing of Prince Street. Is there a way that we might be able to temporarily close it during the school year now? And let's see what happens if you block the street off and watch where the traffic goes. I know it's not exactly the same setup as what the plan has, but it should give us a quick indication if there's going to be some major problems and congestion for the neighborhood. Also, our group, as many of us that we have, if it would be helpful, we talked yesterday, we would be willing to get a spokesperson or a couple of people that would be glad to sit down and meet with anybody that would want to talk to us to make it just an easier way to communicate, and then we take it back to the group. And lastly, as I heard one of my neighbors say, we need a voice. So if there's anyone here that we're getting through to tonight, please feel free to contact us. We would love to have just a feeling that somebody here really cares about what's going on. Everybody here has got to love Downers Grove. It's a great place to live. We've got a wonderful community. We've got a great school. And this is just one thing here that we would really like to have just maybe slow down, take a breath, take a look at it one more time, and then make the decisions, the right decisions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, last time, going once. Anybody else? I think you remember a chance to speak. Okay, we will close the reception of visitors. We move now down to recommendations and reports of the superintendent. The first item is a report from the administration regarding the North High Master Site Plan.
How are we going to run this? Will the clicker move from here or work from here?
And what we're about to see here is on our board docs?
It is. Will the clicker work, Sid?
It should.
Okay. I'd like to begin this presentation by thanking the community members for coming and talking to us tonight. We understand that this is a very important issue for you. We are all homeowners, and board members and I all reside in the community. Our houses are very important to us. Our neighborhoods are very important to us. We understand why you're here. We've read your messages on the blogs. We've reviewed your comments at the city council. We understand your concern about this, and I want to be upfront and frank about that. What we are going to try to do tonight, and some of it will be redundant based on what's already been said, but to go through a couple different, or review several different processes. We want to show you what the timeline is, because there's some concern about that. We want to show you how we've communicated about the project, because it's very clear that many of you have not heard about it until recently. But we have been communicating about it through other means. And we're going to show you those. We in fact have some artifacts. We're going to talk about the October meeting, the feedback that we took away from that meeting, and the changes we recommended from that feedback. We're going to talk about the January 11th meeting. And we are going to discuss why we do not recommend moving the parking lot. And we understand you may disagree with us, but we're going to give you our rationale for that. We were not able to do that very effectively at the January 11th meeting, and I apologize for that. Okay. So this report is the master site plan improvements on the west side of North High. Obviously, the master site plan is larger than that. We started this with a, really, and I'll go into this, but this is a $13.8 million project. Substantial site work at both campuses. We in fact have planned additional work. We do not have the resources to fund it. But that could be in the neighborhood of another $12 million, $13 million, provided we ultimately decide to do all that work. And this has had multiple planning components, as some of you have mentioned, over 3 decades. And I'm not saying 30 years, I'm saying we began in the late 1990s. Some of you brought up our objectives. One of our objectives, our perhaps most important objective, was to improve safety, and we looked at a lot of different facets of the plan at both campuses for this purpose. Enhance educational programming, and primarily that's about increasing the amount of green space available for our students in their athletics, physical education, and activities, and also maximizing the use of limited space. As you know, we've installed artificial surfaces at both campuses. We did that primarily because we quadrupled the use of those surfaces for our program needs, and that was very important because both our campuses are small. Unique challenges at North. Lack of acreage. North sits on a campus right now that's probably a fourth of what it would be if it was redesigned and built today. If everything was equal and the resources and land were available, the campus would be about 4 times the size it is today, given a 2,200 student high school. The campus is in the midst of a residential area, as you're all aware. Students are forced to go off campus for many activities. We have stormwater issues that we're trying to address with this plan. In fact, a large percentage of the cost of stormwater work, and in fact, we have a fragmented campus. We have streets running across different parts of it. So to review the timeline, 1999, the district approved buying the first property in that block that is Saratoga, Grant, and Prince. And shortly thereafter, or sometime thereafter in the early 2000s, district staff met with local residents to talk about buying their properties. And we have been buying them steadily In fact, purchased the last one in 2011. 2004, there was a preliminary study by the district involving approximately 30 people, staff members and community members. I was not involved in that at the time. It was my first year in the district. That group made a report on January 26th at a board meeting. And anytime a report is presented at any board meeting, of course, there's a public agenda. It has to be posted. Typically, there's a report about it in the media, and it's part of the official record. So there was a report from this group on January 26th. On January 26th of 2004, unfortunately, if you look at the history of the district at the time, that following year, the district had to cut about $3 million from its budget because of financial issues. At the time, the district still owned the Woodridge property. It was uncertain what was going to happen to that property. And really, there was just not an opportunity to, plus, not all the houses were purchased at that time. There really wasn't an opportunity to move forward on that project or any project involving the campus at that time. 2008, I began as superintendent. My initial contract directed me to develop a master site plan and resources for that plan. 2009, we hired White & Company. And we hired White & Company specifically because of their engineering expertise, because we understood the site plan would require a lot of engineering. October 2009, the Board of Education received an initial report from the district administration and White & Company about potential uses or potential changes to the site plan at North and South High School. Again, that's a public record. At the time of that meeting, we asked the board to do further planning, involve more persons, get a wider view of the project, because at that point it was very preliminary. Additionally, at that point, we did not have the resources to move forward, but we did understand that sometime in the future we might have those resources should we gain control or should we conclude the property suit with the school site that was in Woodridge. That was at the time litigation. So there was a potential for revenue, but we did not have revenue. That property dispute was settled in the summer or July of 2010. So after we met with the board in October of 2009, we got a commitment to do further planning. But we had somewhat of a break on that planning through the first part of 2010 because we did not have a revenue stream to move forward. Once the revenue stream became obvious after the sale of the property, then we pushed up our planning efforts. 2011, January 24th, we made a presentation in this venue. And the reason we moved the meeting to this venue, we expected a crowd of people. We had about 30 citizens at that meeting. I would apologize personally to you who did not know that this meeting was here tonight. We made the decision to change the meeting late on Wednesday when we heard that many of you had gone to the village council and perhaps we would not have enough room at the Administrative Service Center. So we made those changes late on Thursday or early on Friday. I think it is now on the website. But I do apologize for the late notice.
It is, I just pulled it up.
So on January 24th, we made a presentation to the Board of Education about a conceptual plan, and that was the first time in which we showed the parking area on the southwest side of the North High campus, in addition to a number of other changes on the north and south campuses. The board wanted to discuss the concept in more detail, so we met again the following week. And at that time, the board voted to move ahead with the concept plan. Phase one of that plan was artificial surface and track. Artificial surface was very important to complete first because that could be used immediately. When we make changes in grass field, we have to wait over a year for the grass to germinate and the fields to be strong enough to handle any type of use. So our decision was to put in the new artificial surface first because we could count on using that space pretty regularly when we didn't have access to some of the other places on the campus. And that was ultimately completed September of 2011. Now, in August of 2011, we really began the more detailed planning design of the phase 2 of the plan, which is what we're concerned about here tonight. So we had the plan in concept, but really our intense planning really began in August. On October 27th, we held an open house for the community around North High School. And the purpose of that meeting was to show the neighborhood what the plans were at that point and to get their input about the plans. On November 10th, we made a public presentation at the Village of Downers Grove Planning Commission. On November 22nd, we met with a neighbor, I think that was Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith had come to the November board meeting, which was November 21st. He asked to give us input about the plan. Mr. Schock met with him on November 22nd, and he brought in the plan of sort of flipping the parking lots to us at that point. November 23rd, we reviewed Mr. Smith's plan with the White engineers and the North High staff. January 3rd, we made a public presentation about the plan at the village council meeting. January 10th, again, the village council meeting where they approved the vacation of Prince Street. January 11th, we made the presentation to the neighbors, again, inviting roughly the same group of people we invited to the October meeting. And I think one of the issues for us at that January 11th meeting was that you came expecting to give us input. We came expecting to tell you how we addressed your input from October. And so in some ways we were not prepared to discuss what you proposed to us at that meeting. And then January 23rd, we are all here this evening. So that is the timeline for this project. Now let's look at the communications. And again, we can assume that a board meeting is a public meeting. There has to be an agenda that's published in advance. The minutes are a public record. The meetings are covered by the press. In fact, for most of the time that I've been superintendent, at least prior to Mrs. Browning, we had ads in the local news media following each meeting, and we can show you some of those. And more recently, we've been relying on our website to share information about board activities. So I'm not going to go into detail about every communications, but I will like to show you some examples. This is an email that we have a push email list. We blast email to everyone who is on our list, including hundreds of our parents. At this time, I think we have about 7,500 persons on our blast email list. This was emailed to the persons on that list in October 2009, following the October board meeting where we first discussed the master site plan concept. This is excerpts of our website, and I know you can't read this from this, but it does show you a written detail of the plan. It does show you the master site plan. It does show you where the parking lot's located. This has been on our website since January 24th. I will show you other references to this website and different communications to the parents and to the community as we go through. This was an advertisement on January 26th that has the same information. This is an email, an email or the district newsletter. We've gone to doing this electronically now, sent to more than 7,500 subscribers. This references the upcoming change in the master site plan, or upcoming change in the North Campus as a result of the master site plan. This is a graphic showing the neighborhood for which we mailed flyers advertising the October meeting. It's an example of the advertisement we ran in the Reporter about the October meeting. And that's a picture of the October meeting. Some of you were there. I'm sure I recognize many This is another example of an email sent to our subscribers describing the open house meeting and the next phase of projects. This is our district annual. This was mailed, is that correct, Mrs. Browning? Not just emailed? It does have a reference in there, including the website about the master site plan. That's another graphic showing the homes for which we mail flyers about the January 11th meeting. It's an advertisement about the meeting that was in the Reporter. That's the district newsletter also advertising the meeting with references to the website. And I know you can't read all this. We have copies, but I just wanted to show you the graphics of those actual documents, so you look at those actual documents. And of course, we had the January 11th meeting. Now, when we had the open house in October, we did not take minutes of the meeting. It was not a board meeting, nor was the January 11th meeting. We had some questions about that. We did not take minutes of that meeting. It was not our intent to take minutes of the meeting. However, at the end of the meeting, we did ask people to give us written feedback about the project. And this is some of the feedback that reflects concerns. I think this is generally the feedback that reflects concerns. There was not enough landscaping in the project. People were concerned about that. The signing, the pickup and drop-off signage had to be clearer. We needed to limit parking time surrounding the Prince Street West lot. And we needed to do things to improve safety. Specific traffic concerns and ideas were offered. That's the written takeaway we had based on what people wrote for us. Does not perhaps reflect every conversation that was had, but that was what we gleaned out in writing from that meeting. This refers back to Mr. Smith meeting with our staff regarding flipping the lot and moving the lot from adjacent to the school to a more remote location in the northwest corner of the campus. Okay, based on the October meeting and the feedback we had, these were the changes that we recommend for the project. Adding about $200,000 in landscaping, changing the egress placements at both west and east lots to reduce conflicts with neighbor driveways. That process is still going on, because we're still working with the village on that. Limiting the sidewalk along Grant to discourage drop-off and pickup on the street. Increasing signage for pedestrian traffic control, and finalizing a viable bus route plan on Prince and Saratoga. We believe we have been able to do these things. The remote or distant lot was considered. I think this is an important point. Our professionals did review Mr. Smith's scenario when he brought it to us. In fact, we looked at similar scenarios in 2009 during the planning process. I'm going to have, at this point in time, Mr. Schock go through the issues with regard, or the advantages and disadvantages of both of these, and give you a detailed understanding of our thinking.
I think everyone understands by now that the situation with the parking lot being located to the north or south of this parcel is a very complex issue. And I'll try to explain what came across the design team back in 2009, and again a few months ago when we took a second look at Mr. Smith's drawings and reconsidered this option. What I have on the screen here is one of many designs, but I can use it to show what we're talking about here. I'll talk real loud.
You can't, Marty, we can't hear you unless you use the
All right,
microphone.
let's see if this will. I've got a pointer here, and I want to point to a few things on this drawing. This aerial view is with the existing parking lot in the picture at the north side. Right here. And roadway coming up through between the two properties, and the vacation of Prince Street and what we're trying to do with that. And of course it is to combine these two lots and eliminate or reduce the need for students and athletes, visitors, to cross Prince Street to get to the parking lot. So therefore the vacation. Now the location of the parking lot with respect to that area is an access situation. If we leave the parking lot on the north side of the property, we can access it from either the south side via Prince Street, or we can access it from the north side coming down Sherman and Prince Street, Saratoga areas. The problem with that is that if we access the north parking lot through Prince Street in whatever configuration it might be, whether it's the street is left open, it's a causeway, it's a combination pedestrian vehicle path, we still have kids crossing over that street, over that pathway while vehicles are accessing the parking lot. And that's buses and cars. If, on the other hand, we access that parking lot from the north side, we're bringing buses and cars from the north side of the campus, and they'll be coming down Main Street and Ogden Avenue and making left turns and causing traffic congestion there.
Mr. Schock, maybe I
Yes.
can help, because I'm not sure people are picking all this up.
Okay. Let me get a little closer to it. So,
What you're talking about is, if you're accessing the parking lot, to access the parking lot from the south, you would have to come up what is more or less currently existing as Prince Street. Whether you want access to that, you do not, correct?
correct.
If you're going to, we have issues with this at this point, we've already discussed, in part because of students walking across, in part because it sort of brings up our campus, in part because we have not only kids walking across the bus, but we just going to have kids walking home in this direction. We have safety issues with maintaining Prince Street as it is.
Mark, you still can't. Let me give you this microphone.
Okay. Marty, would you please review again the problem with accessing from the north?
Sure.
If we close this,
If we close the south entrance to a north parking lot, our one option is to come in from the north side. And we're talking buses, we're talking parent drop-off and pickup, and some visitor parking. And to get to the parking lot, they would have to come down Main Street or Saratoga and Ogden Avenue. And on Ogden and Main, that would cause left-hand turns for school buses to get off Main Street or Ogden, crossing traffic to get in the north side. So it's a congestion problem, bringing our buses in from the north side of the property rather than from the south side of the property where most of them come in from. So other problems exist with this layout. I think everybody can understand that the logical place to put a parking lot is as close to an entrance as possible. And we have 3 entrances into North High School, and the major entrance for all of our bus students, some of our staff, some of our students, and visitors is the Prince Street Circle.
which would be down in this area, correct?
Correct. So it makes all the sense in the world to get the parking lot as close to the entrance as possible for a variety of reasons. And we've talked about that in the past. Weather conditions, getting people to their cars as quickly as possible. We all understand that the parents that would be picking up and dropping off kids are not going to drive a distance from the school to drop off their kids. They're going to drop them off as close to the school as possible. So a north parking lot doesn't give parents the closeness that they want to get over to the Prince Street Circle.
So what Mr. Schock is saying is that the parking lot is in here, and it's up here where it is now. What we anticipate is, with no parking lot here, that parents will continue to pick up their students here in the late afternoon after activities and athletics as they do now. And without parking that area, we really don't have a solution to that problem other than they will probably continue what they're doing now. I understand, your interest in us working with them and trying to change their behavior. Our concern is that's going to be very difficult. We have no legal obligation or, authority to do that. We can just suggest it. So if the parking lot's up here, our concern is we have not addressed the problem. The late afternoon pickup that many of the residents have communicated to us as a problem without any area down here. And there's one final issue with this. Assuming Prince Street no longer exists, we also have to provide for deliveries on our campus.
Right. We have 2 loading docks at North Campus, both on the west side of the building. One is Prince Street, and semis use Grant Street to turn around and back into our property. There isn't enough room in the circle to do that. The second loading dock is north of the swimming pool and in between the swimming pool, gymnasium, and the south radius of the running track. And to access that loading dock, which is at the Fine Arts Wing, semis, again, similar to Prince Street Circle, must pull west to turn their large semi-trailers in and back up through that plaza to get to that loading dock. The problem with the parking lot on the north is that it puts the practice field to the south, and the trucks would need to pull into that grass field, into that practice field, to get completely turned around in order to back down into the plaza and get to the loading dock. So we would be infringing upon that practice field in order to keep that loading dock usable to us. And of course, one of our major goals is to provide more green space for our PE and athletic programs. And that soccer field would have a driveway right in the middle of it.
So if I can summarize, Mr. Schock, so again, everyone sees this. If we put the parking lot here, we have options to bring the buses from the south, but that continues the problem with Prince Street we currently have in terms of any safety issues involved in students crossing the street or in between the buses or crossing the street at any time when there is any kind of bus traffic there. That's a concern. If we close the street, then the bus access will have to be from the north. And there are concerns about buses turning on Ogden and Main Street that would be problematic if they have to turn left at either one of those streets. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If we have the parking lot in the north, the solution of the late afternoon parking down here doesn't exist because that is now a soccer or that is a grass field, so we will not have parking there. And we anticipate the same sort of issues that are affecting the community now will continue. Additionally, we will have to make some allowance for our our semi-trucks and our delivery loading in this area, which will mean that this will not be a rectangular field. It will be grass, but it will not be a rectangular field. It will be a smaller field than we currently have. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I summarized that. I apologize for talking too much, but I want to make sure everyone understood that.
The next slide, we're going to talk about the benefits of putting the parking lot on the south side of this parcel of property. So we're going to use one of the concept plans. Now this was put together quite some time ago. There were dozens of concept plans, but for purposes of conversation here, we'll use this one, and please just ignore some of the minor changes that might have taken place. The benefits of an adjacent lot, again, you want your parking as close to your entrance as possible. This lot is significantly reduced in size from the existing parking lot. One of the reasons for that is to take some of the load off of the local streets, and we've moved them across to Main Street. On the other hand, we've pulled the green space off of Main Street so that kids don't have to cross that street 8 periods a day for PE programs, and we've brought it over to the west side. This unifies the campus. The elimination of a through street, Prince Street, eliminates traffic cutting across the middle of our campus and all of the inherent dangers we have with pedestrians and vehicular traffic. Now, what does the south parking lot do for us? Besides being located as close to the main entrance of this campus as possible, which allows our 1,200 bus riders to get into the buildings as quickly as possible, for after hours, it also allows us to get this troublesome problem of athletic pickup off the streets. We will use this parking lot because it's as close to the building as we can get to direct parents into this parking lot, and student athletes will, and other late students will get into the cars at that time. This also allows us, and we all heard some conversation about the parking situation. We'll talk about that, the bus parking situation. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this is primarily a bus pickup and drop-off parking lot. It gets the buses off the public street, stops them from double parking on the street. It stops them from parking and stopping in the middle of the street and jamming up local traffic by putting the buses in this parking lot and dropping off kids in the morning and picking them up in the afternoon. We've heard concerns that this won't work with kids walking in between the buses. This is how we have handled South High School for the past 5 or 6 years after the second access was built, and it works very well, and we have had absolutely no problems with it. We don't let buses move when the kids are walking in there, and we don't let the kids walk when the buses are moving. There is a way to do that, and it works very well. So we get the buses off the street, we get the kids off the street. Unification of the campus for weekends and off hours. If there's activities on the property, we've got a parking lot, again, closed for access to the athletic facilities, both indoors and outdoors. The plaza between the parking lot and the stadium is where the entrance to the stadium, the main entrance, will be. So we've got direct access there. We've got parking adjacent to the practice fields, and we tie it all together with a pedestrian pathway between the two properties. Now, that pedestrian pathway will be designed by requirements of the village for emergency vehicle access. So we can get emergency vehicles in there. You heard me mention a minute ago that the green field on the south end of the property would bottle up, box in the loading dock to the Fine Arts Wing. The driveway to the parking lot on the east side is aligned with that Plaza Road, so semis can pull into our parking lot, turn around, back up, and go back into the plaza and back to the loading dock. The other thing that this does, a byproduct of getting the parking lot close to the entrance and getting the buses off the streets, is get the parents off the street. And we understand, and the traffic study identified, that we have cars circling the neighborhood. The neighbors have told us that. We have observed that. We will be able to control to a great extent how parents pick up and drop off their kids. We can't stop them from double parking, driving around in circles. That's not, those are public streets, and that's not something District 99 has control over. But by providing a parking lot as close to the entrance to the campus as possible, we can encourage, through control of students and signage, to use, a very efficient layout in that parking lot. The White & Company has been working with us since 2009. Mark, do you want to summarize that, or was that
Go to
okay?
the next slide, Mr. Schock, and I think the next two slides, I think, do summarize, if I'm not mistaken. This goes back to the problems with the north, and this is...
These are the bullet points we touched upon in the last few moments.
Well, go back, Mr. Schock, please. Go back one more. If we're going to summarize,
sorry.
we went too far. We think locating the lot closest to the entrance is the most logical place. We believe it is a convenient place for students, staff, parents, and visitors to get them as close to the entrance as possible. It does maximize the space we have in terms of green space, which was one of our goals, including safety. Next slide, please. It supports the needs of delivery trucks and location to loading docks. It supports the entrance to outdoor facilities, improves pedestrian and vehicular safety, and we hope we'll reduce the issue of circling and blocking the driveways that's inherent because there is no parking area on that side of the campus. So that would be a summary of why we believe the south lot's a better option. Now we're going to have Mr. Carlson, who is a architect with White & Company, and he is also lives in that neighborhood.
Good evening. I'm really happy to be here, and I know I was invited by the board to speak tonight for a few minutes. I'm Rich Carlson. I'm the president of architecture and engineering for White & Company. I've been there for about 30 years now, or almost 30 years now. And I live in Downers Grove, a few blocks away from Downers North. I actually went to Downers North, and my kids went there. And so I have a real love for the community and a love for the school district. And White & Company was hired 2009 to do the master plan. And when we do master plans, we look at many, many different things. And we actually partner with the school district and school board and try to find out what all the issues are. And we do many, many different kinds of concepts. Historically, we do a lot of K-12 work, higher ed work. We do a lot of master plans for a lot of times very congested sites that has all the same issues you have here regarding circulation of children from the cars into the buildings, after school, buses, and also the evening activities. And we have done this for many, many, many communities adjacent to District 99. So we are very accustomed on working and solving these problems. I mean, I look at this as a puzzle, and what is the right solution to any puzzle. And there's many good solutions. We think we have the best solution, as we talked about. We think this is the best thing for the community and for the school district in the long term. But we also know that there's never one perfect solution when you have all these restraints. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Next slide. To move forward with this project, the board will have to approve documents in February to award construction contracts. We will be contacting people in the community to work with us on landscaping. The village has also indicated that they want to work with us in this process, including people from the neighborhood. Next slide. And this is a picture of one of our concerns of students walking among the buses. But at this point in time, really, it's board questions and board discussion.
First, Dr. McDonald, let me clarify. The awarding of the contracts will occur at the meeting on February 27th. Is that correct, the business meeting?
Correct.
Okay, so February 27th would be the first meeting which there would be any action taken to award contracts.
Correct.
Okay. With that, do other members of the board have questions for either Mr. Schock, Dr. McDonald, or Mr. Carlson?
Nobody wants to go first?
I think you just volunteered.
I have a lot of questions.
Yes, I just volunteered, yeah. I just, several statements to make. First of all, to say that as much as the community, and we've heard comments about possibly flipping the lot and the soccer field, as much as we're being asked to be open to hearing those discussions, and as much as staff and has looked at this, I'd also make a request that that our neighbors be open to the idea that there might be other ways of mitigating and solving some of the concerns and problems you have, other than flipping the two locations around. I've heard several comments tonight, as well as at previous meetings, and I was at that meeting on January 11th. There wasn't any requirement to be there, but I felt like I should be to hear those comments. And a few things came up, and I'd like possibly a little more elaboration. Let me just run through those. First of all, a statement about from the National Safety Council that there are things about this plan that are in contrast with those recommendations. Could you speak to that? Let me kind of. Second, I thought some very good concerns about people parking in the lot and lights shining into neighboring homes. And in fact, I had sent a couple suggestions possibly that could be looked at, and maybe our architect could make some statement about that. Needing more oversight after hours. Clearly, there's issues right now. Whether we were to make a change or not, I think those issues should be addressed, and I'm sure my fellow board members would agree. I guess that I'll leave it at that for now. So.
Let me address your second comment first, and then I'd like Rich Carlson to address the safety standards. With respect to controlling or managing after-hour operations, with the south parking lot, we will have the space needed to get those cars, those drop-off and pick-up and buses off the city street onto our property. Now we can manage them. We can manage the buses no matter what, but we can't tell parents how to drive their cars down a city street. But when we use our parking lot for pickup and drop-off, we can now dictate how to do that. We can do it through signage. We can do it through manpower out there after hours. There's been a lot of conversation about getting to the athletes themselves. So make it a blanket statement that you will not be picked up on the street. You will go out into the parking lot where pickup is planned, and that's how it will be. And we can enforce those kinds of controls. With respect to safety standards, Rich, I'd ask you to comment on that. I know that you've studied those, and
talk to that point. The National Safety Council has recommendations or criteria for design, and these really refer to new projects, new sites. Usually a high school this size would have about 80 to 100 acres of property to plan for, and these would be the guidelines that you would try to use. In this case, Downers North has, I think, 28 acres of properties, much more compact. So these are good guidelines. We do follow these as best as we possibly can with the constraints that we do have. So, and we did that in this case. We do that in all of our projects we work on. We do realize that these are good plan and guidelines, but they're not codes or they're not necessarily rules. There's guidelines that we do follow.
Rich, let me do a follow-up question. With respect to those guidelines, do you see a problem with how we're planning to use that south parking lot for pickup and drop-off?
Not regarding any of these guidelines, and also our drawings have been submitted to the village, and they've also reviewed them, and they find there's nothing. They're all fine. They're acceptable.
What I read in those NSC guidelines was specific recommendations that we avoid situations where buses can back up.
Right.
And, you know, my take on the plan as it is right now, that we have less likelihood for that to happen than we do with the new plan than we do right now.
The parking lots are designed that we would have no backing up at all. They would basically be pulling in one behind the other, then parking and then leaving in the same way. So, and that's when usually there's more safety issues when buses are backing up. In this case, we're not doing that at all.
I think there was a presumption that when you're stacking buses up one behind the other, one could possibly break down or be forced to back up. That possibility exists, but it would exist almost in any scenario, I think.
I would hope that would be rare, but that could happen. Sure.
And again, let me reiterate that the administration, our staff that are outside directing traffic at that time of the day, do not let the buses move when the kids are moving, and they do not let the kids move while the buses are moving. This is a proven process here at South High School right outside this room. And so while kids have to walk into the parking lot to get on the bus or get off the bus, those buses are static. They are not moving.
So things we could do to eliminate headlights shining into neighbors' properties.
Let me talk about that for a minute. We have committed $200,000 to landscaping, and not all of that would go on the west side, of course. Some would go on the east side too, because we have some similar issues over on Highland.
Certainly.
There are limitations, restrictions by the village for landscaping. There are requirements for landscaping. We are going well beyond those limitations, but there are some rules that we have to follow. Screening for security purposes, we have to be careful and be able to see into the parking lot.
Right.
Make sure that nothing is going on that shouldn't be going on there. $200,000 will go a long way toward landscaping. We have done this in the past. The south parking lot at North High School on Main Street was a similar situation with 3 or 4 residential homes backing up to this new parking lot. We worked very closely with the neighbors, and they helped us landscape this. We had a landscape architect. We did some screening with plantings. We did screening with fencing. I think there's some berms out there, some retaining walls. There are a lot of options open to us, and there is plenty of parkway green space around this parking lot that we can do some wonderful work with landscaping. And again, we would ask that the local neighbors join us in that process of designing the landscaping.
My hope would be that the lot, because I think that there's a presumption too, it's been stated that who wants a parking lot across the street from their house? But hopefully that parking lot need not be an eyesore. Hopefully it could be something that could be attractive, and so that's obviously something we'd like to see addressed. With the parking lot for extracurricular activities, what are the possibilities that we could limit its use such that you know, we might lessen the impact on the neighborhood? There was a lot of people expressed concern about that 4:30 to 8 o'clock time frame and how we're addressing that. And we've heard a lot about how we're handling the busing before and after school, but surely this has been addressed.
Well, there's a give and take here. If we have programs 7 days a week on our property, and we have to provide, if we don't provide parking for those programs, the parking will be out on the city streets, and the traffic control problems will be consistent with what we have now. Our intent is to expand our parking lots, add up to 200 more stalls in the 2 parking lots, and get some of those cars off the street and onto the parking lots. So it's a trade-off. More parking lots, get the cars off the streets, fewer parking stalls, and put the cars on the street. And so that's why we see, I mean, if we could turn these parking lots into green space, we'd much rather do that. We need more green space. But we have to handle the cars that feed our property. The village ordinances would require about 700 parking stalls for North High School if this was a new campus being built today. And I think we're in the 400 to 500 stall range? A little over 400. So we're well under what it would be ideal, but we're making, there's a lot of progress here by adding as many stalls as we're trying to do. So again, it's a give and take.
Can we work with the village to better control some of the traffic volume on Saratoga? We've heard comments about how there's not enough room going up and down, and now we're kind of concentrating more people onto the street because they don't have access to Prince anymore, and what can we do to mitigate those?
Well, we're dialoguing with the village. We've made it very clear to them that we can't solve all the problems in this very small campus setting. One of the many points came out of the October 27 open house by the nearby residents. Lots of concerns about traffic, poor quality driving skills, double parking, dropping off in the middle of intersections. I can go on forever on these. But they're real. There are intersections that you can't see the stop signs because of trees and brush that's growing around. We submitted that survey of information to the village and said, here are things that we can address and here are things we can't address. You can. And ever since then, we've had this dialogue with the village. We can't force the village to put in new stoplights or stop signs or cut trees down that are causing a vision barrier. But with us bringing these to their attention, the neighbors bringing these same issues to their attention, I think we have a much better chance of addressing those things. We can certainly, with better control of how people use the side streets around, especially the west side of the campus, the better off we all will be.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I don't mean to monopolize the time.
Well, you had a lot of good questions. Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
There was some concern regarding Saratoga, that buses turning out of that parking lot onto Saratoga and trying to make, I believe it was left-hand turns. There's hardly any room. Is there thought being given to, this is so obvious, I'm sure somebody's thought about it, only right-hand turns for the buses?
Some of the buses will make right-hand turns going north into the district. Some will make south. Well, the thing is that we can control those bus drivers. We don't have to let them out to jam up the traffic. We can control as they leave. Once people are on the street or if the buses are parked in the street, there's some difficulty doing that. But when they're on our property and we have our people out there, we're letting them go in a controlled manner. We're not going to let them jam up the parking lots by sending all the buses at one time. And the routes will have to be looked at. You know, some of the buses are going to go.
Your bullets.
And that will be something that North High School, working with the bus company, does in determining which way the buses go and what way down the streets. Right now, virtually all the buses, I understand, Chuck, all the buses come in through Prince Street from the south.
They all come north on Prince Street. They all, the majority of them leave going south at Saratoga, but there are some that go north, 4 or 5 go north on 45.
One of the things that won't happen anymore is the use of Grant Street for bus traffic, because they'll be pulling into that south parking lot. So we won't have that problem. That'll eliminate one turn that they have to make, and of course, those big vehicles making turns in those tight intersections, if there's parents parking there where they shouldn't be parking, that causes a problem. So we've eliminated the need to use Grant Street for that purpose. We're also doing what we can, especially with the landscaping, to discourage parent drop-off on Grant Street. Can't stop them from doing that. That's a village issue. But the lack of a sidewalk there, landscaping there, should help promote the use of the parking lot for drop-off rather than city streets.
And I know you've said before, I think there will be a lot of notice to parents and encouragement to parents and students to do the right thing. And I hope that that will help.
That was a suggestion that came out of the October 27
Yes, I remember that. I was at
open
that
house,
meeting.
yes. And certainly, and we can control that. Yep.
Another major concern I heard was pedestrian traffic crossing from Pierce Downer and Herrick coming across Saratoga, and how we're able to manage that in cooperation with the village. Is there anything that we can do about that? Because that parking lot will be used by folks wanting to use the schools.
Off hours.
Cut through, off hours,
Yeah.
cut through, and that's what we heard so much about was it's off hours.
We have talked about a crosswalk. There's a sidewalk that splits the soccer practice field with the south parking lot. There's a sidewalk there. And in all likelihood, we would put a crosswalk across Saratoga onto Herrick's property. To have a designated pedestrian crossway, sending our kids down the sidewalk, not through the middle of the parking lot, and across the street, and any junior high school kids coming from the opposite direction would now have a crosswalk and a designated walkway instead of, that block of property that we bought has no sidewalks right now, so kids walk in the street. The sidewalk splitting the parking lot and the roadway and the grass field will encourage kids to use, that sidewalk, help eliminate that problem.
Anybody else?
I had just a quick observation. With the movement of the students parking over on the east side, and a lot of times those students who drive to school are student athletes and student activities folks. And I know that we tend to lock up sections of the building so that, you don't have access to some of the building. But are we going to be able to leave some of those hallways open for students to be able to leave their cars on the east side and not have to worry about maybe bringing their car over to the west side? Because activities start right after school, so that any of that activity will not add to this congestion at the 6 o'clock time.
Terry, the west parking lot is not designated a student parking lot during school hours.
No,
Okay.
I know that. I
Okay.
know.
We will leave that, we do now, leave the field house doors open.
Oh, okay.
Go out that side and go across the street.
Because sometimes I know you lock up stuff when it gets cleaned, and
That side of the building doesn't get locked up until after everybody's out.
so we can encourage our students to stay on the east side, and that might alleviate some of the congestion over on the west side. It's just one of my things.
Okay, anybody else?
Great presentation.
Okay. I want to thank the administration for the presentation. Again, this is an informational meeting. There is no decisions being made this evening. February 27th is when the contracts would come to award a contract. Does any board members have anything they want to add? Move on to the next informational item on our agenda.
All right, the next information item is a report by Mr. Whitehead, Director of Special Services. As the board is aware, we have a program called Transition 99 for our older multi-needs students who are transitioning from high school to adult world. Earlier this school year, we were notified that the location of that program will have to change because it is in a building owned by the Westmont School District. And as a result, we are looking for another location for that program. But we also thought it would be a good opportunity to discuss not only that, but also the program itself. So Mr. Whitehead, and he will be brief since the hour is late.
I will. Good evening. My goal for this presentation is to give a little information about the definition of transition services under IDEA law, which is the federal law that covers special education students, the current transition program here in District 99, and also program updates. There's a lot to read here, but in summary, this describes the change in the federal law in which students between the ages of 18 and 21 and 11 months, the day before their 22nd birthday, are eligible to receive special education services, and this occurred in 2004. Therefore, what we now term as transition services have three components, and those are the three components up there. You as the board have this in your packet, along with the information that I gave you as well about our program. But basically, in summarizing, is that transition services are for those students who have completed the traditional high school program and are still eligible for special education services. And those services actually help those students achieve their IEP goals in the area of post-secondary education, independent living, and also adult or transition skills that they need for them or their parents. Our current transition program is located at South School on Grant Street in Westmont, Illinois. We currently have approximately 34 students between the ages of 18 and 22. The length of the program varies depending on the student's need, between 1 and 3 years. The program hours from 8 to 2:30. In our current staff, we have 2 teachers. We have speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy as needed for the students per their IEP. We have 2 vocational coordinators, 6 job coaches, and we have teacher assistants as well. Those are the areas of the curriculum that we have: academics, independent living, community, rec and leisure, vocational, parent adult services, and life skills. As Dr. McDonald talked about, I'm here to give you some of the program updates that we found out regarding the Westmont School District. Once we were notified that they were looking to use the building that we are currently in, the south side of South Elementary School. They were looking to move their administration center, and initially they were going to partner with another elementary school district to bring their services or bring their administrative center over to South School. That being said, because we are leasing from Westmont School District, they notified us that our lease initially would not be renewed because they wanted to take that program and that building over again. That being said, we decided to investigate a relocation of our program. We met early in December. It was myself, Mr. Schock, Dr. McDonald, and Mr. Stalen met with Westmont School District 201 to discuss potential options for our program. At that time, we toured Westmont High School. There were a couple of different locations that they wanted us to view. And at that time, they also mentioned the fact that we would be able to move to the north side of the building on a temporary basis. Our current program, as I said, we talked about the staff that we have and the components. And after meeting with Westmont School District 201, we came up with a plan and a timeline to figure out what our next steps would be. After some discussion, the decision was made that we would accept the offer to remain in South School, at least for the upcoming school year, and we would investigate other opportunities to have a more permanent location. Those options could be another lease in another elementary school building, or a location in Downers Grove or the surrounding communities, or potentially looking in the future if we were going to purchase a building as well. The goal is for us to really be in a program or in a location where we don't have to move, and we would be able to have that site for the students and parents for some time. For the upcoming school years after that, because of the way that the transition program is designed, and students are able to receive services up until the day before their 22nd birthday, we could potentially see increases in our student population. This year, as I said, we're about 34, 35 students. For the next couple of years, potentially we could see our student population increase to almost 50. That being said, we would also have to increase our teachers because we still want to make sure we have an appropriate ratio for those student populations as well. As I said, we'll be looking for a new program site and location. At least for the upcoming year, we know we will be at the north end of South Elementary School. And for this winter and also in the spring. I will be going to some other programs in the area, some other transition programs with the local school districts have, to see what type of programs they have in place, because obviously if we're looking for a new site and location, it'd be a good idea to see what else is out there as well. Any questions from the board?
Any questions? Mrs. Beckman?
Yes.
I'm sure you've examined this, but the alternate site within that building, I know it's a fairly small building anyway, so that's going to really be enough space for next year?
It will be for next year. We've done some walkthroughs already. Actually, Mr. Schock and myself went there today along with the transition staff and looked at where we are. That north side of the building has about 3 areas that are designated as classrooms, and then there's another room that is pretty large that's been already split from a previous program that was there. It will look like we'll be able to at least house the program that we have now. The real reason why we decided to stay there was for some consistency in the program. We're used to the program, our families are used to the program, and the students are as well. And it's a real good location. So this also gives us some time to come up with a long-term plan about where we want to go in the future.
And just another observation, you probably already are in touch with SACID, but they too have a transition program in Westmont, but in a different location, and I'm sure they'd be willing to show you their site. It's not entirely ideal, but they have had trouble finding alternate sites for sure.
They haven't, and Westmont, SACID actually was one of the programs that I did contact to talk about their transition program and what they have to offer. And really the challenge is that with the transition program, you really want the students to be able to feel as though they have completed their high school portion.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, which is why some of the models that are out there having the program in the building, really are not some best practices for that, because we really want those students to experience the fact they've completed high school, and now this is them their opportunity to transition from high school to adulthood.
It's a very good program. I hope you find a good one.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
We now have the quarterly financial report.
Sorry, Mr. White, my computer is going goofy on me here. Here we go.
It's the hour.
It is typical at this time of year to present or to the board a quarterly financial report to track our expenditures. This would be after 2 quarters, is that correct, Mr. Stalen?
Yes.
And
You gotta grab this microphone.
okay.
Might have something important to say.
We'll see.
Once again, I'm really surprised that everybody left before the financial section of the report. But I will make it brief. There really are no big surprises here. This is in fact, the only surprise would be if you look at the data on the next exhibit. I had the wrong data in your packet. But we're about 2.8 million, 2.9 million higher in terms of overall fund balance right now at this point in time at the end of December compared to last year. That's fairly normal. I tried to explain that a little bit in the narrative. But as we looked through it, there were no major concerns overall. Fund balances are as strong as they were at the beginning of the year as they are right now as they were at the beginning of the year. What I tried to do with this was, if I can get this on here, explain just in a real bird's eye view the comparison of revenue. Where at this point in time, because we're so property tax dependent, and we have collections of property taxes in June and September that affect this fiscal year, we basically by December are virtually 94% collected in terms of our revenue stream. The expenditures, however, still are going to be going throughout the rest of the year, and so we're generally around 50% or a little bit less than 50% expended. It varies a little bit based on the number of school days in attendance, and sometimes because of the number of payrolls that fall within the first 6 months of the fiscal year. But this is right on track. This is right where we were last year, and I'll go through real briefly some of the more detailed exhibits. If we look just at the revenues, again, property taxes, 99% collected, that's fairly normal. Other local, which includes replacement taxes in that grouping for this, about 60% collected, state aid 48%, and federal aid about 44%. These are our normal percentages. They're within normal variance ranges, so on a first glance, there's really nothing too concerning. If you look at the summary here, it shows you in detail. The one thing that I did note is that replacement taxes, the budget for that was roughly what we collected last year. We just collected just under $1 million last year, and that's why this line item was so high, 66% collected. We over-collected last year, so we ran better than budget last year with our replacement taxes. It was an unusually high year, and now they're kind of coming back down to about $800,000 this year. So we'll be about $120,000 short, we expect, of that $1 million that's budgeted for replacement taxes this year. So that's the one surprise we have in the revenue side. Everything else seems to be falling kind of into place where it has been in prior years. The state aid, which is always a concern, we're 91% collected here, 94% last year. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Sid. Okay, we're good. State aid last year was 84% collected. The reason is looking at the budget. Because we were not sure what was going to happen at the state level with funding for schools, we reduced our state aid and state funding by $2 million. And we actually did collect over all of our dollars last year, or virtually, we're still collecting them, but they didn't reduce the funding last year. So this one line item does come up, and we were over collected again for state aid as well, and that's why we have a bit of a variance at 94% compared to 91. If we were to increase this dollar for the budget by $2 million, we'd be right on track with last year. So our expectation this year is that we just budgeted the total amount. Our expectation is that we'll collect it. We don't know for sure, but right now we believe we will, because the state has not recommended reducing it yet. On the expenditure side, salary and benefits running on track, purchase services, everything is pretty much within its normal ranges of collection. I will go back here just briefly. Capital outlay is one that there's variances for it. I'll try and move it up a little bit. 73% expended this year. When we show that, that's something that really depends on how much we budget and actually get done in the summer, because that's when a lot of the construction work is done. And so that percentage compared to last year is a bit higher than it was. And there was a question that one of the board members had. And here it is in with the dollars. Capital outlay was about 70% spent last year compared to 73% this year. It's just really some of the timing of the projects that occurred over the summer. We still have an expectation that we'll spend most of the remaining budgeted dollars for capital outlay. We're really looking at it 46% each year, last year and this year. We're on track with where we thought we would be, so I don't want to belabor it. If you have any questions, please contact me.
Information request that was fulfilled by Mr. Stalen. Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to the consent agenda. I invite a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
As a tie.
Oh, I didn't even, did I hear an echo?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mrs. Pavasich moves, Mrs. Beckman seconds. Call the vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. The consent agenda has been approved. Recommendations for action, 9A, award of bid for the South High cafeteria roof replacement. Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Schock, will you brief us on that?
I'm sorry, reading my board docs, trying to get to.
Yeah, we're all having that problem tonight.
Yeah.
We're talking about the South High cafeteria roof replacement that we're recommending to the board.
Right, this was a project that was identified last year, or in this current fiscal year, to be done. And bids came in significantly higher than expected, and also on one other project. So looking at priorities, we decided to defer the cafeteria roof, and that is not this roof, this is a new roof. It's the roof next door to us, the old 1963 roof. 1963 building, that is the second roof on there. So we rebid for 2012, 2013, and we're recommending that the low bidder be awarded the contract for this work to be performed this coming summer. Just a side note, I know it's late, but this was one of many roofs damaged in the tornado that came through last summer. However, it wasn't damaged enough to get a free new roof out of it. It was the least damaged of the roofs that were damaged. We decided the best thing to do was to perform a temporary repair paid by insurance, and use the additional dollars that insurance will cover to apply it toward the cost of the new roof. So that's our intent this summer. Now, we're still negotiating with the insurance company. We will until the last dollar comes in, so can't really tell you how much of that share we will get. It won't be significant, but it will cover a portion that we would otherwise have to pay out of our budget. So we're recommending low bidder. We have not worked with this contract in the past. Our architects and engineers have. They have a good reputation, and we have a pretty significant process of qualifying contractors and met all those qualifications.
How did we do the last couple days?
Oh, the wind and the rain and the snow.
Well, I mean, my goodness, we had that rain and
Yeah, the temporary patch
snow.
here to hold.
All right.
Now, I'm probably going to phone call tomorrow since you've asked that question.
Yeah.
But I have not heard anything, I haven't heard anything either.
Any other questions?
Just a quick question. Was this lower than the two high bids last year? Did we
No, it
have
went
any
up.
advantage about it?
No, it went up 2% over last year, and it's because of the petroleum market.
Oh.
We all hear about the construction industry and how bad it is, and great numbers, and we tend to be getting good numbers on a lot of construction projects, but not one that use petroleum products. And so we're going to get hit with parking lot situations.
Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe if we had the pipeline.
Time for paper.
Okay, the chair would
Thank
invite
you.
any
Thanks,
other
Bill.
questions? Okay, the chair would invite a motion.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion to award contract for $220,494 to GE Rutherford Roofing Company. Motion and a second. Call that vote, please.
Me.
Mike.
Aye.
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 Aye, that motion carries. The bid has been awarded. Next item, abatement resolution, alternative revenue bonds.
Mr. Stalen?
This is hopefully going to be an annual resolution that we are starting this year. It's our inaugural resolution. If you recall, we issued $10 million in alternate revenue source bonds, or we call them alternate revenue bonds, ARBs, to fund the HVAC project, primarily taking place at South Campus here last year. We funded about a 10th, or actually 11th or so, a portion of it, $1.5 million, directly out of operations, and then the intent is to pay off these bonds, the principal and interest due on these bonds, out of operations. We considered possibly issuing debt service extension-based bonds, which would have been much more expensive, and also just allowing those to be paid for by our taxpayers. This way, we save interest expenses, on the bonds by having a shorter maturity for these ARBs opposed to if we had gone the debt service extension-based route. And by abating this each year, we'll be able to pay for it out of operations, out of existing revenue. And we hope we're able to do the entire issue this way. So this is a very positive thing. We're very happy to do it. This is something when we issued the ARBs, we intended to do it, and now it's time to execute the abatement.
Any questions, Mr. Salen?
That's a great idea.
Chair would invite a motion to abate taxes.
So moved. Second.
Ms. Kupka moves, Mrs. Beckman seconds. The motion is to abate taxes for the 2011 to pay debt service and general obligation bonds. Call that vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye, the motion carries. Those taxes have been abated. Item C, 9C, approval of staffing ratio for the 2012-2013 school year. Dr. McDonald?
Dr. Smith is going to make a report.
Quickly, just as a reminder, last year we had the unusual year district-wide where we saw an unusual spike in our enrollment. And so we asked Dr. Cassarda to update our enrollment trends. And so this is just a reminder, this is a chart you saw last year. The red line is the revised Cassarda trend, and the blue would have been the numbers based on the 2006 report. So you have the 2011 and the 2006 trends. So you can see while our trend pattern is similar, the numbers are a bit higher. And then in the written report, in the memo to Dr. McDonald that you received, we talked about our recommendation for staffing. And just to walk you through a few sets of numbers to help you better understand our recommendation for the ratio moving next year. Because last year was so unusual in the enrollment that we saw, we actually did not have the Cassarda revised numbers done at the time that we staffed last year. So we knew that South was running about 3.6% above trend and North was running about 3% beyond trend. So we took the Cassarda 2006 numbers and we adjusted them, knowing that moving forward we would have more reliable numbers again. So when you see the anticipated modified, these numbers, these projections were based on that 103.6% and the 103%. So these were our predictions, and on September 30th, when we did the fall housing report, you'll see we were fairly close to what we predicted with the anticipated. A bit unusual that for second semester our numbers are actually increasing when I went back and looked at other years, so you'll see we are pretty tight with what the projections were. And interestingly, if you look at the revised numbers that did come in March that we didn't have at the time, they're extremely close. So again, they should be close. The data was from last year that we pulled from our district and the sender districts. But it shows that at this point we feel pretty good about the Cassarda revised numbers. So based on this modified enrollment last year, you'll see this was the 239.4 was our FTE staffing for those positions that we call above the line, those content areas that we talked about last year. And if there are questions about the above and below, we did talk a little bit last spring, but if you have more questions, let me know. So planning ahead now for 2012-13, the Cassarda enrollment projections show North at 2130, South at 3024, and the district at 5154. Now, based on what the building data that they have right now, rolling the 8th graders in, rolling the 9th graders up, etc., these are the projections that we have right now. We know there will be some movement with those numbers. If we were to use the 22-to-1 staffing ratio that we moved to 2 years ago, our FTE, again, our current FTE is up in the top 239.4. If we were to use the 22-to-1 ratio, our staffing level would be 234.3. We're recommending a 21.8-to-1 ratio. The reason being that, as you can see, the numbers are a bit tight. And so by moving to the 21.8 ratio, while there is a difference in a sense, it's 3 less staff members, our enrollment, though, has decreased somewhat. So it's relative. But that 21.8, while it doesn't sound like a great deal, that those couple of extra staff members allow an extra 0.2 here in math, an extra 0.2 over here in social studies, or wherever it need be. On top of that, as the students enroll for classes and both of the buildings plan for their FTE, they can make additional recommendations for staffing. So if the 28.1 doesn't work and we need an extra section of math or Spanish or whatever that might be, the door doesn't close on this day, but they need a number to move forward with to do the initial planning. And then the final graph I offer at the bottom is just really to give the staff kind of or the board a longitudinal picture of what our enrollment projections have been and the decline that we've seen over time, and what our staff numbers have been over time as well, whether we've added or what the difference has been from year to year. So pretty close to what the projections have been with CASARDA again, and we're hopeful that moving forward that the adjusted numbers will continue to reflect more accurate trends for us. So the trends show north and south over the next couple years, going down just a tad bit, leveling off, and then they actually show north in about 15, 16 spiking up, and south settling, and then south eventually catching up to a spike. So we will see, depending on what's going on in those sender schools with our elementary kids. Any questions? So our recommendation is a 20.8 to 1 ratio. 21.8 to 1, my apologies.
Any questions from Dr. Smith? Ms. Woodard?
The information that you're sharing with us today, has it been shared with the association prior to today's meeting?
It has.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I talked with Lisa earlier. I'd like to see that number go back to where we were previously at 21.5. Because, even in Utopia, we'd like to see it 18, but we know that that's not going to happen. But now that, I don't know what those numbers would work out to.
Another piece is over the next couple of weeks as well, we have a couple of recommendations from the buildings for additional staff for new positions that don't currently exist. So this also allows us, within the constraints of the budget, to also look at some of those recommendations that will be coming up from the buildings.
So as long as we keep going down.
I think one of the issues that we have had to deal with in the last couple of years, we're all aware we changed that ratio 2 years ago for financial reasons when we expected to cut multi-million from the budget. And what we found in 09-10 was there was a jump in our enrollment that was not predicted. And so what we had was not a 22.0 ratio, but likely a higher ratio because of that spike. So we, as you remember, we contacted Dr. CASARDA and asked him to do the projections again because, like any other statistical projection, the farther you go out into time, the less accurate it is because it's just like the weather. The farther you go out, the data is projected into a straight line, and things happen you cannot predict, like the economic recession. He did not factor that in when he did his last projection in 2005. And then, so we made an adjustment, not to the ratio, but what we projected the enrollment to be, and frankly, we over-projected. So what we're trying to do here is to get back on a single or a steady point of data that we're going to make our projections on. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be shooting at a moving target. And as Dr. Smith has said, there are other positions that we would like to add to the staff. If the associate principals come back to us and say we can't do it with this, we need another 1.0 staff member, we would like to add that. We haven't been able to do that in the past. But we're sort of in a situation where we're really concerned about how we're going to make accurate projections into the future, because our data has jumped, and too many variables have jumped on us in the last couple of years, and we are trying with this to refocus that.
So if we add additional staff, that actually would, on an effective basis, lower this number? Okay, just so I'm clear on that, okay. Other questions? The chair would invite a motion to approve the recommended staff ratio of 21.8 for the upcoming fiscal year.
So moved.
Member Davenport moves.
Second.
Member Pepka seconds. Call the vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. That staffing ratio has been approved. Item 9D is approval of the purchase of the vacated Prince Street land. Dr. McDonald?
Okay, Mr. Schock, again, this is more or less, essentially, we are purchasing the land that was vacated. By vacating Prince Street, we are purchasing the land that Prince Street was on, I guess. And we're paying roughly half the value, because the notion was that roughly half of our students are Downers Grove residents and roughly half are not, ergo the village council's proposal to have us pay half.
We did request a waiver of the entire cost, with some expectation of hitting all of it. City council had quite a spirited conversation, debate about that, and there was some compromising, I think, amongst the council members, and hence the recommendation and approval that we pay half of the bill. So we're recommending purchase of that property at half of the calculated value of the property.
Any questions or discussion? Mrs. Kupka?
I just want to confirm that with purchase of this property, we still have plenty of money to do all the things we've promised the neighborhood to do. The money allocated.
I think plenty is a big.
The money allocated to landscaping, let's leave it at that.
I hesitate because some news that came through actually tonight before the board meeting. We can still fund the project. You'll recall several months ago that we approached the board with a recommendation to add some tier 2 work and some other options to the project. And not knowing exactly how everything will pan out, those items are being included in the bid as alternates. And so if bids come in great numbers, we can pick up on those options. And if it's surprised anywhere along the line, we can drop some of those out. Tonight, we found that because of the timing of the county of DuPage with new practices, new requirements for stormwater management, not coming in, not being approved until April, and we need our permits now in order to bid the work, we'll have to live with last year's, the current year's rules and regulations, and unfortunately, the new regulations that come in April will be soft in some way. What's that mean? We're going to have to build a detention basin that we had not planned on building. Now, we had budgeted for it in case this timing issue hit, but we were led to believe all along that the timing would match up so that we wouldn't have to build this additional detention basin. We know that if we're going to go ahead at this time, we're going to have to build that detention basin, and it's a very expensive piece
Well, how
of work.
expensive?
Between $500,000 and $600,000. Again, we had budgeted for it, but because we felt we were led to believe we wouldn't have to do it, we were earmarking that money for other enhancements than Tier 1 and Tier 2. So
Are you saying that in the new rules to be adopted in April, after April, that we wouldn't have to do that?
That's correct.
We know that for,
We know that
for sure.
But unfortunately,
We can't wait.
The permitting process, in order for us to get started with construction, needs to take place now. So we're in between a rock and a hard place. We either go ahead and move forward now and build a detention basin, or we delay the project and don't build a detention.
Is there any way to work with them in terms of permitting a certain portion of the work now and subsequent permits?
No, that's
No.
actually what we learned today, is they will not look at that project at North High School as two separate projects, East project and a West project.
They who?
They won't.
They, who is they?
Well, the village has the authority and the responsibility to oversee stormwater management rules and regulations that are in effect by the county. So it's, the village is requiring that, but they're forced to do that because of the county rules and regulations.
Now, to clarify, none of this impacts the decision to purchase the vacated land on Prince, is that
No, it
correct?
does not.
So these are different questions, so so this is something you learned today. We need to know more about this, in my opinion. But
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily affect the vote
As
on
long as
buying the
there's
Prince
still
land.
money.
Correct.
Right.
I would assure Mrs. Kupka that we will find the revenue to do the things that we promised the community to do.
Thank you, Dr. McDowell. I would expect no less.
And this other issue is very important, but tangential to the vote we're about to take.
Yes.
This doesn't affect the vote. Any other discussion regarding the purchase of the land?
I
Sure.
keep my opinion to myself after sitting through the council meeting.
Yes.
Okay, so the chair would invite a motion to purchase a vacated street.
I would move, I would move that we approve compensation to the Village of Downers Grove for vacation of Prince Street in the amount of $73,681.
Is there a second?
I second.
Ms. Kupka seconds. I'll call that vote, please.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Do the people that voted no wish to make a statement for the record, or no?
No, I told you I
No
keep my
comment.
Okay, fair
opinion
enough.
to myself.
Okay, and then I do wish to know more about this other new issue, which really wasn't part of this, but that's...
Me too.
We need to know more about that, but that's really not on the agenda this evening. You didn't know till today. Item 10, old business, second policy committee reading on the concussion policy. Ms. Kupka, can you talk to us about this?
Well, I sure can, but I just lost my, connection. Can I look on the view? Thank you. Basically, this is a new policy. There's been a lot of press about concussions and head injuries. This is a new policy for the board to consider. We are asking for the school to comply with the concussion policies, practices, and bylaws of the Illinois High School Association. This is in line and in concert with recommendations from several professional organizations, including the athletic trainers, the orthopods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think the board's had opportunity to read through. Basically, we've taken a very conservative approach, saying that if there is a concussion or a suspected concussion or concern by either the coach, athletic trainer, athlete, or parent, determining that the player should not play, that we would take the most conservative action, and that player would be removed from practice or the competition, and not return until they were cleared by a physician or an athletic trainer working with a licensed physician in the state. We also added that we would contact the school nurse and try to coordinate activities to make sure that the student did not come back before they were released to do so. Questions?
Any questions? This does qualify as second reading through a variety of reasons, and if there's a motion to approve this,
So
and it
moved.
passes, okay. And then being on the policy committee, I will second that. I will second the motion to approve policy 7.305, student athletic concussions and head injuries. Call that vote, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, on to new business. We have a first reading of temporary permanent illness or incapacity. I believe this relates to the one situation we had earlier this year, and then how we're going to handle this. Actually, Dr. McDonald, can you tell us a little bit about this, where this comes from?
Well, actually, I'll
or-
defer to Dr. Smith.
Fair enough.
Because really, this came from,
Yes.
this is a personal issue, but you're correct. It does stem from a concern of an earlier situation, which I will not
Discuss, yeah.
it's not appropriate to discuss, but what we are looking for with this policy is a consistent manner of treating people in this situation that is both appropriate for them and fair for them and also for the school district. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Smith, I'll let you comment
All right.
in addition.
The language is much more clear on the difference between a temporary and a permanent disability as well. That was, the old language kind of cross-referenced the two, and it was hard to read, it was hard to follow, and in the past couple of years, we have had some instances, multiple, where we've had to turn to this language to really help, us and the employees, to help everyone define what's a temporary illness and when an illness becomes a permanent illness, when disability and other, other options need to be explored. So this is just much more clear for both the employee and for us as the employer to understand. The language was kind of a combination of what the IASB had recommended and then our legal counsel.
And again, this is first reading, so unless somebody has questions for it right now, they can address them to myself, Ms. Kopko, or to Dr. Smith.
I'll wait.
And we'll bring this up at the next meeting. Okay, moving on to our second reception of visitors. Is there anybody still here that would like to speak to us about anything related to the school district? Going once, going twice? Okay, we will close the second reception of visitors. Move on to communications and announcements. Do we have a report regarding Len?
We will have our first meeting of the 2012 New Year this coming Friday. We've not had a meeting since November when we met as a state conference in Chicago. So we should have lots of issues to talk about and report back at our next business meeting.
Thank you. Any report on SACID?
I don't know how to circulate this, but I brought a summary of the SACID strategic plan, and I certainly wouldn't read through all the pages, but I thought you might want a copy of it to take a look at it. The amusing part is, to me, is that Dr. Volpe brought it to us as a 3-year plan, and the board said, you can't do this in 3 years. So he went back and extended it to 5 years. So it's now a 5-year strategic plan. And if there's a way, it's a public document, so it could be put on our website.
If you give it to us, we can.
Okay, I'll leave you a
Scan it,
copy.
email it, yeah, absolutely.
And I think that was it. I may have had one other thing, but, and then just very quickly, we just received our financial statement audit, which came through just fine. Just so you know, our revenues were about $57 million, and our expenditure, just to give you an idea of what SACID does, and our expenditures were around 55.8, so we had a net in the bank of $819,000. So it's a pretty big operation.
Okay, thank you for that report. A report from the foundation?
We are in the process of making some final decisions on our event, and we will be doing that in the next meeting, and hopefully be able to bring you all of the details by then.
Okay, wonderful, thank you, thank you. Next, we have upcoming board meetings. We need 2 volunteers with Bagels with the Board on February 4th.
Mr. White, as I promised late last year, I would, so it's already on my calendar for February, and so I'll do
Mr.
it
Davenport
again.
has 1? Okay, that's 2. Okay. Mr. Davenport and Mrs. Boyle. And then our next workshop meeting is February 6th, 2012. Our next business meeting is February 27th, 2012. Dr. McDonald, is there anything further to discuss before we adjourn?
There is not.
Okay, with that, the chair would invite a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Davenport moves. Do you have a second? Second. Mrs. Boyle seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned.